So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for attending our very first Senior Living Spotlight webinar. So today's webinar, we're going to be focused on some of the basic and standard tools in Epicor that may be overlooked, that you may or may not be using in your business, or that maybe you may not be getting the full potential out of. Okay. Before we get into the finer details, I'm just going to bring up our safe harbor statement. This is essentially to state that the items and processes that I'm going to be showing today are subject to change, and that the processes are quite generic in nature. So they may differ from your individual business processes that you have going. I'm also going to be showing the tools today in classic screens, because that is what the majority of our customer base are still using. Future webinars that we host will start to display more of the kinetic screens as they change, but today's I'll be showing the classic screens. Just leave that up for another minute or two. Okay. So a little bit about Precise for those of you that don't know, which most of you are very familiar with Precise. We have over 50 staff globally, so most of you have probably dealt with staff at Precise, whether that be in our consulting team, our support team, or even when it comes to our products with ARM. What you may not know is that while the majority of those are in Western Australia, in Perth, we do have people all around the world. So myself in Adelaide, we have some project managers and other team members in Victoria, New South Wales. And then we've also got staff from New Zealand to the Netherlands to the US, everywhere. So we are very spread out, and but majority are in Perth, WA. So we have been, as Precise, have been an ERP solution provider for 30 years this year. So we're going to be celebrating 30 years as the ERP solution provider this year. So, you know, we're all very excited about that. It's quite a big achievement, I think, for a small business. And we're also a certified Epicor Premium Partner. We're all very proud that we have won the International Partner of the Year 5 times now. So again, quite a big accomplishment for, you know, a relatively small business. We have our consultants in the professional services team are industry specific. Okay, so we have certified consultants in operations and manufacturing to finance, and then we also have, say, myself and my team in the senior living. What you may or may not know is that we've actually got a dedicated team of software developers as well. So we have our development team, or our Precise products, who have developed advanced requisition management, ARM, the advanced project management, APM, and even a point of sales. And they are all sold globally through the Epicor channel as their premium ISV partner. A little bit about me. So I have been with Precise implementing Epicor for over 11 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. Before coming on to Precise and becoming a consultant for Epicor, my first introduction to Epicor was as a customer. So I was that SME or super user. So I know I had that firsthand experience in what it takes with change management. I wrote those end user training documents. I delivered that end user training for myself and the team that I was working with at the time. So, you know, I understand the challenges that come with it, but also that, you know, give it a little bit of time after, and you find out that those big things, or what seem like big things, often dissipate quite quickly. So that's a little bit about my introduction to Epicor and consulting. I have had extensive experience in the senior living. So since starting with Precise, I have been focused predominantly on senior living solutions, but that is including accounts payable, receivable, asset management, and all of those finance elements as well. In my time here, I have now finished 13 successful end-to-end Epicor SLS implementations, all the way from initial analysis to post-go live systems and sometimes even support. And I have been involved in or assisted with over 10 finance and or aged care implementations as well. So many of you have dealt with me on more than one occasion. On the personal side, I have been the last 12, 18 months been training and competing in powerlifting, and I just did my first sanctioned competition on the weekend just gone. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, moving into today's webinar. So we're going to be focusing on 3 overlooked tools to level up your SLS analysis. Okay, today's agenda, we're going to be utilizing standard analysis and search tools. So everything that I'm showing you in the first 2 sections are standard, not customized, not modified. They are just out of the box tools. And the focus is going to be around client management. So the first tool is going to be Client Workbench, which has been out in Epicor for a couple of years now. Client Analysis, which has been around for a very long time, but may not be being used to its full potential to get different types of reporting out. And lastly, the one custom solution that I'll show you is the Resident Census Dashboard, which is a custom dashboard that's been developed along the way and modified as needed. We will have a Q&A. So you will notice a questions panel on your screen. Feel free to, and actually I invite you to enter any questions that you have throughout the webinar. And at the very end, we'll have time for that Q&A. We'll go through and answer as many questions as we can. So please, I encourage you to enter in any questions as you have them. And the prerequisite for the things I'm showing today is just the Senior Living license. Alrighty, this is just a high-level workflow of your client or resident. Okay, so we know we've got our client record, and with that we have all the demographics, might be some clinical information, their contacts, primary, secondary, emergency, and so on. Linked to that client record, we then have our admissions for our villages and our residential care, your the Australian National Aged Care Classifications, our ANAC assessments for your RAC. We've got service plans for home care, and then you've also got all your different billing customers and their respective balances as well. Okay, and then against the client and also the billing customer, we've got things like your client financials, like your billing run, adjustments, direct debit statements, and so on. In today's webinar, we're going to just be focusing on the top section of the client records and some of the related information, predominantly around the residential care today, residential care, retirement living. So the client workbench. Why use the client workbench? Well, there are a wide range of filters. Okay, so being able to search for client records, your resident records, there are so many ways within the client workbench that you can then search for those, as opposed to just for part of the ID or maybe by first name. Okay, there is the ability to have a wildcard search, an overview of resident details in one place. Okay, so that includes demographics, contacts, the admissions, billing customers and their balances, as I mentioned before, and more. Okay. You can open the related records directly from the workbench. So things like that client entry, you can launch directly from the workbench. You could go into the accommodation. You could open up the trackers to see the financial transactions as well. And you can also launch the client analysis, which is the next dashboard I'm going to be showing you, directly from the workbench as well. So here is just a couple of sneaky screenshots to give you a quick overview of the client workbench before I delve in and give you a bit of a demo. So I've highlighted or I've sectioned off the filters at the very top. So we have lots of different filters ranging from, if you know the exact ID, the name, the type of client, a prospect, suspect and client, their gender, parts of their address, maybe it could be their sales territory, the facility that they're in. Lots of different ways that you can then search for one or many client records. You can also see information relating to that client, like the comments, things that are very important to note straight away. And you can retrieve the relevant details for each of those tabs across the top. So in the example here, you can see that I've retrieved all the different billing customers for the wonderful Betty White. So we've got the VAT account and the fee account showing here, and the current balance of their accounts. And also whether or not they're on direct debit or not, so that you can do that bit of a spot check as well. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do now is go into Epicor and give you a bit of a look at the workbench in play. Okay, so here's my Epicor, and I'm just using a home page here with just some standard shortcuts. So what I'm going to go into is the client workbench. Now this is available in your versions just from the client management and setup menus. So the client workbench, as you can see in here, we have lots of different filters that are available. And then we get a list of client records returned down the bottom here. Okay. So in the past, lots of customers have actually built quick searches and modified their search screens just so that they can search for part of a name, or maybe by surname or first name and so on. Okay, whereas now with the client workbench, you're able to have all of those types of searches in one place as standard. I'm going to focus here on the wildcard searches, because that's probably by far the greatest thing that this definitely has going for it as well. So where you see this kind of icon, you've got the closed brackets and you'll have an asterisk, or an asterisk period asterisk. That allows the asterisk becomes your wildcard search. Okay, so for example, if I was to put an asterisk in here and put in Don, another asterisk, what I'm saying is I want to return any resident record that has Don anywhere within the name. And if I search, I will then bring up, I have here Donald Trump, and I've also got Kimberly Gordon, because we start with Don, we end with Don. If I was to remove the asterisk from the beginning, I only want to see records that start with DON. Alternatively, if I want to end with records that end in DON. Okay, now this could also be if you know what the name starts with and you know what it ends with, but you have no idea what the spelling is. Using my own name, for example, lots of different ways to spell Megan, and it can never get correct, apparently. So we can say like M-E, and perhaps it's an asterisk, and then we'll end with an N. Well, that will then return all records that start with M-E and end with an N. Okay, so this is a wonderful tool to give you the ability to return the records based on any type of search criteria that you put in here. Okay, the wildcard is a very powerful tool. You can also use it, as you see, on address line 1 and also on postcode. Okay, so if you know the street address, for example, you could put in the asterisk and maybe the name of the street, and it will put that pull those through if that's what your address line 1 is. Or anything that starts with a 60, okay, and then you can return and get a list of all of the client records that have a postcode as their primary address starting with 60. Right, so that is how to use the wildcard searches. Now, if you're using the sync address territory, like a lot of our customers are doing, the resident will inherit the sales territory and the primary address from the accommodation that they're admitted into. Okay, so as long as the sync address and territory flags on the client is done prior to admission, the address and the territory from that room or unit that they're being admitted into will automatically update the client record and any respective billing customer accounts that they have. That is with the exception of respite. Okay, so with respite, we know that it's just a temporary admission. So we don't want to override their primary address, especially if, for example, that resident may already be in our village. They've got a set residency in the village, but they happen to go into respite for 1 week, say. We don't want that information to override that primary address, so it doesn't do that automatically for you. This is where being able to search by the difference between searching by the sales territory and the facility come into play. So in this example, in this environment, I've just got very generic territories set up. Now, a lot of our customer base will have sales territories set up for each of their facilities or villages may have its own territory, okay? But as I said, you might have a resident in a village, but then they're also in a territory, they're in a village, but they're also in a respite facility. And that sales territory is still going to show the village. Okay, so just giving you a quick example here, if I was to select, I'll close that for now. If I was to put in here the precise aged care, or precise retirement village, okay, I'm going to look at precise retirement village. Okay, so we have in here a list of residents that are admitted into this facility, okay? And we're going to pay special attention here to the wonderful Stephen Owen. So here we see that they have a sales territory of retirement living. They are in the precise retirement village. But if I also do a search here for the precise aged care facility, and I'm going to do a search, you'll notice that Stephen also shows up in here. Now he's got the retirement living territory, the primary address being the village. But you can see that they're showing up in here as a client because they do have an admission in that facility as well. So this is a way that you can get a list of residents that are admitted into a facility regardless of what their territory or their address is. Okay, and that's just one of those examples of where that may be relevant. Okay, now the other things that we can have a look at in here. By just selecting on any resident that is returned in the results list here, in this client list, you select on any of these records, I can then flick through and have a look at all the irrelevant information. So I can see their demographics straight away. I know they're 62, which is based on that date of birth that's on their client record. The gender, marital status. If you have things like the country of birth or religion, interpreter services, that will appear in here as well, all from that demographic screen on the client screen. You can then retrieve a list of their contacts, and you can see quite clearly who the emergency and primary contact are, who the enduring power of attorney, next of kin, okay? You can then have things like doctors and so on. You'll be able to see those contact records directly in here against that resident. I can also get a list of all of their client accommodations. Okay, so this will show me they have separate client accommodation or resident accommodation IDs. For each of the rooms that they're in, I'll just make this full screen. Okay, and you can see the entry date, departure dates. So in this example, we have the retirement village. Okay, it was an open admission. And they came into care on the in February, 2019. They also have a departed respite admission back in 2022, and now they have an open respite admission this year. Okay, so this gives you a list of all of those separate admission or accommodation records for that resident. As I mentioned, you can see community or home care related records in here as well. So for those, and I don't have those in this environment today, but you'll be able to see any related service plans or case notes if you are using your home care system module, you'll be able to see service plans and case notes there as well. ANAC assessments. So your classifications, you'll be able to see the assessments that have come through. Now you'll see the default when they first get admitted, and then as those assessments are being entered in, whether that be manually or via your Proto integrations, you'll then see the relevant ANAC assessments displayed in here. We've got our billing customers, which is what was included on that screenshot in the previous slide. So in here, we have in our billing customers, I can see that we have a loan record for the village admission and what the balance is. And I can also see for their fee account, they're on direct debit and they have a zero balance. So I can see that information straight away. Lastly, we also have the ability to see calls. So if you're using the call log for correspondence, you'll also be able to see a list of any correspondence or calls, call records against that resident also. Okay, so then I can see in here, this is an update information call type, for example, and I can go into, I can see in the text here, you can also hover over it to see that they phoned to request Bindi's contact for Steve to be included for joint power of attorney. So that's just a quick overview of how you can utilize this wide search functionality, being able to see all of that information at a quick glance for each resident. But not only that, you can also, maybe they called up, okay, and they, you've had a phone call with them and you just need to record that straight away. Well, I can just right click on the client ID and I can also enter in create call. And that will then take me to be able to not only see existing calls, but I'll be able to enter in the call information, whether that be an email, a call, they walked in and spoke to me. I could enter that information directly here, and then that would appear on that calls list straight away. Okay. I mentioned before that you can launch the relevant information, those different records. I can open the client accommodation directly from this record. So I can open it in client accommodation entry. I could, from the billing customers, if I wanted to see the transaction, say it was a RAD account or a load account, and I want to see the transactions against that, I could open that in customer tracker and have a look at the records against that data record. I can also go directly into client entry to either update information or create additional records. Okay. So aside from that, the one last thing that I do want to show, which is really, I think, quite important and a great feature to have, is let's click on Miss Betty White here. You'll see that we can have the comment show up here, right? Some might be loves to chat, it's very funny, but it can be inappropriate. Perhaps it is someone that always loses their keys. And so they're always, at the front and they've lost their keys, or they might go walkabout. Perhaps they're not quite in memory support yet, but there are signs, okay? And you want people, whoever is going to be answering those calls, whoever's going to be looking at this, that's the kind of information you want them to see straight away, okay? There's even been examples where, maybe a family member is at a different facility elsewhere, but they want to come and live at your facility alongside their brother. But that brother doesn't really want them to move in. So, that could be something that you could put in there, right? To bring that kind of information straight to the forefront so that if they're calling up, oh, okay, I'm not going to give that information to them. And that also flows through to that contacts list. If you have someone calling up, you ask them what the resident details are that they're inquiring about or wanting to update, you search for that client record, you bring up the list. I can see the contact information there. If the person that you're speaking to is not on that contacts list, you can see that nice and clearly straight away, and then determine whether or not you can or can't divulge or update information based on that conversation. So in summary, this is a really, really great tool for your initial investigations, your initial calls or inquiries. When you have somebody that you want to look into that record, or they've just called up straight away, you can use this workbench, search for the person, and then you can see a high level. You may not need to go further, but if you do, you can delve in and drill down into those relevant records from here. Okay, so this is a nice simplified way of being able to use that. Alrighty, I will leave the client workbench there. Okay, so moving into this, you can see this is just a quick summary of what we've discussed and using, for example, the facility to search and retrieve for those records. Now, we're going to move into client analysis. And I just want to bring your attention to the client analysis dashboard button at the bottom before we head into that. Okay, so that's where we can launch it directly again from this workbench. So the client analysis, it has a list of all your admissions, both current and departed. Right, you get the various filters. So that may be from your entry, your accommodation entry start and end dates. It could be your departure date ranges as well. Okay, you can then see co-share information in there. If you're using the co-shares for your villages, you'll be able to see that information. And you'll be able to dissect the data using standard functions like your group by, grid filters, and summaries. Now, here is a quick little snapshot showing the filter options that are available. And you'll see I've highlighted in the yellow at the bottom there that we have more of those wildcard search options. Okay, so on this time on the ID, on the full name or on the last name, you'll be able to use that wildcard, the asterisks, to search for those records. And I've also highlighted here where you can see the co-share information, so which admissions are co-shared. Alrighty, let's jump in to the client analysis and take a look at the data. So if I just click on the client analysis dashboard, this will show up for me. I'll make this full screen. Now, you'll be able to, as I mentioned, do a search. Maybe you want to see what admissions occurred, just the admissions that occurred in January. Or perhaps you just want to see, I want to see all the departures that were entered in January. Okay, so you can use these date ranges here to return all the records that fit that criteria. You can also see only respite, all right, or I want to exclude respite. And you've also got your status. So I only want to see current admissions. So if they've departed, I don't want them returned. I only want to see current admissions. So you can then see that in here as well. And you can also filter directly by your facility or village. Okay. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm going to leave those blank just to return all rows. So we've got our client analysis, which has returned our results here for me. Now, this is an analysis tool that I'm sure many or all of you are using. This is more just to highlight some of the tools that you can use within it that you may not be aware of. Okay. So within here, this is showing you all of the details for the primary resident. Okay. So we have our resident information, what accommodation they're in. We've got our entry date, departure dates, and it also goes through to the care types. As you can see, is it co-shared? And then has some of the additional client information about their gender, date of birth, their birth month, right? So maybe you're looking for a list of who has birthdays in February so that we can do a bit of a resident morning tea, right? So to do that and to utilize this data, if you right-click anywhere where there is a list view or a grid view, right-click, you'll be able to see these three functions, the group by, summaries, and grid filters. Okay, so potentially for, let's say for grid filters, maybe I only want to see the records at the moment that do have co-share. Okay, I can use that is co-share grid filter and say true, and now I have a list of only those that have co-share. I can see my primary resident information here, and I can also see who the secondary resident is. Okay. Now I'll take that off, and I'll also show you how you can use your group bys and summaries. So let me put on the group by here, and I'll also show the summaries. Okay. Now the group by, we have a section at the top that we can drag any header in to group the information. And the summaries, anywhere where it's just numerical, you'll be able to use that to create a total. I'm going to use this one on stay days. So on the stay days, you'll see that we have options. Wherever there's a sum, you'll be able to have average, count, max, min, and sum. So using this as an example, if I wanted to look at, say, average, the max, and the min, and I also wanted to see the count, right? Just to show you what that will look like. So if I click OK, and I go to the very bottom of my list, I'll be able to see that the length of stay on average across everything is 1,456 days. There's a minimum of 8 days, maximum of 7,170, and there are 26 records that's including in that logic. Now, perhaps I wanted to see what that would be based on care type. Okay, I could drag the care type up to the group by, and now I could see, you can open it up to see as well as along the top, that for permanent aged care, we've got a minimum of 62 days, maximum of 7,170. We got our average of 1,800 for 13 records. Okay. You could even go one step further and group that again by gender, right? Is there a difference between our male and female days, right? I could actually drill into these and see that for permanent aged care, right, our females actually have an average day of 670 days. Our males have an average day of 2,494. Right, so you're able to drill down and see that that level of information. And just to get rid of that, you can drag them back in or just untick those options, and then they will disappear for you. Okay. So all of these options allow you to copy and then paste that into Excel as well. In some of these grid views, you'll have the option to send it directly to Excel. Others, you'll have copy all, including labels, copy selection, and then pasting that in Excel so that you can go in and do further detail as well. Okay, so what I will do now is flick back. Here's just another little example of when we can use those options. So as you can see, I've just got in here the average for the stay days, and you can group that by the care type and the gender. But again, as I mentioned, you can even do the month of the birth month as well. I want to get a list of all of those in a specific facility that have a birthday in February. Okay. Alrighty. Moving on to custom options. So the resident census dashboard. Now, this is a custom dashboard that actually started out as a customer raised requirement, and it was about over 5 years ago now. It was a requirement that they wanted to see the admissions, departures, transfers, and then the clinical information like leave, enteral feeding, and oxygen, all in one place. Okay, being able to filter that by what facility or village it is and date range. So I want to see all the records in this time frame. It's now in use by a number of our customers and is, it's ever evolving. Okay, so as it gets used and different requirements come up, it can get amended and updated to be, to fill those specific needs. So once we've finished this, if throughout this webinar and this display of the custom dashboard, if you feel like it's something that may actually be a good fit for your business, it's something that might be of use to you, or perhaps you see the potential of that, but there's actually something different that you would like to develop instead, by all means, please, raise a ticket with us via our customer portal, and we'll be more than happy to, provide you with any information or, go into those details with you. Here's a little snippet of our resident census dashboard that we have built. You'll see that we have a list of a whole set of tabs across the top, from resident admission to transfers into your clinical information. You can see the date range and the facility options. Now in this screenshot, you'll see that we've actually got a chart to the right-hand side of each of those as well to see the movement of the data that's being returned. I will now quickly go into the Epicor itself and show you this dashboard, and you'll see that it looks a little bit different because I've made a couple of little changes just to show you what's possible. Okay. Now I'll show you that with the custom dashboards as well, we can just have separate menus so that you can have dashboards and the different tools put in there specifically as well. Okay, make it nice and available to all of your team members. Okay, so resident census. Where this is useful is while the client analysis, okay, that has all of your admission related information. Okay, you can filter that and return the records for all your admissions within a date range, all of your departures in a date range. What it doesn't show you, and what there is nothing standard in the system to give you that that list easily and straight away, is of your resident transfers. Okay, so we have bed movements happening all the time, or people moving between units. This allows you to say, look, for between this date range, I want to get a list of all of the transfers that occurred. Maybe it's just for a specific facility. Okay, and in here you'll be able to see that, for example, we have Mr. Al Pacino over here, who transferred from Precise Aged Care room 7 to room 4. Okay, and the transfer date was on the 14th of December 23. And it turns out actually did a bit of a swap, because we can see that Betty White here also transferred. They transferred from room 4 to room 7. We could also see that we have a Harold Anderson, who was in the Epicor Aged Care and transferred from room 11 to room 6 in February. In addition to that, you can see that we've got our Protocare recipient ID, the date of birth, some Medicare information. This gives you a nice quick view of all of your admissions, transfers, departures. We can see leave records, and again, you can refresh all and see all the records that are related to each of those tabs. So I can see that we have some leave records here. So from this, I can see that, yes, they may be in their admissions. They might be admitted at the moment, but these are the people that aren't in their room, for example, on a specific day, or they weren't in their room during this period. Okay, so you'll be able to do that. It was like a nightly census to see who is there. And again, you can also, as I mentioned, see some clinical information, so your enteral feeding and oxygen PAPs. Now, when it comes to all of these tabs, in that screenshot previously, you would have seen an additional graph to the side. Well, in this example here, we can even have it as a separate tab, all right? So sub-tab, I've got my transfers. I can see all the records that are returned, but I can also click on the transfer chart view and I can see, the amount of records. So for example, in admissions, that might show a little bit better. In the sample data, we can have a graph to see during each of these periods of time, what number of admissions and departures occurred. Okay, and that is based on whatever results are returned here. So if I filtered that by a facility, the graph would show those for that facility. Okay. So there's just a summary. We've just gone through the resident census dashboard, and there's just a little snippet of what we went through just now. And that actually brings us to the end of the Senior Living webinar. We do have a bunch of time left over for questions. Do we have any questions at all that we can go through? Okay, so wildcards. All right, so I just saw the question come up now about wildcards and is it available everywhere? So the wildcard search isn't available everywhere, but it is available where you see that the closed brackets and the asterisks, okay? So there are different places. There's a CRM search, for example, that does have the wildcard function on the name there. And as you saw, there's a client workbench and also the client analysis. So it's only the fields where you see that closed brackets and the asterisks that will determine if that field is a wildcard search. Do we have any others? Let's see. Okay, so I can see, can we add more tabs to the client workbench? You could potentially add more tabs to the client workbench. And yes. So you could most definitely, if there's specific information that you want to be able to see that isn't on there already, you could customize it, make a custom version of that workbench. So keeping all the rest of it the same, adding some additional ones on. Yes, so if you do want to, investigate what's possible with those, by all means, please, raise a ticket with suggestions on what it is that you're after. And we can have a look into that, see what the feasibility is, speak with our technical consultants as well, and get back to you with the information. And let's see what else we've got. Okay. Are you able to see co-sharing information in the client analysis? You can see who the secondary resident is. So the client analysis will show you which admissions are co-share and who the secondary resident is. But the information displayed in that analysis tool is on that primary resident. So if you do need to, drill down and see the information for that secondary resident, you could get the ID from the analysis tool, and then go into the client record or the client record for that specific resident to see that information. But in the analysis tool itself, it does just show you the primary resident information for like their date of birth and gender and so on. Okay. Oh, thank you, Sasha. Appreciate the feedback. And a bit confused about the kinetic and classic screens. Radio. So for those of you, some of you may have attended the Epicor webinar earlier this morning, which was talking about the upcoming releases. If you were not able to attend that, essentially Epicor has been over the past couple of years converting over to what they're calling the kinetic UX, so the kinetic interfaces. Kinetic screens essentially will allow you to open those screens in web view. Okay, so it's a completely different layout. It is a considerable change, but does give you more flexibility in regards to how you're accessing Epicor. Okay, you can get to it from a web client instead. The majority of our customer base are using classic screens at the moment, which is similar to what I showed you today. And Epicor, as of 2025.1, which is being released in May, 95% of the residential care screens are going to be available in kinetic view, with the remainder slowly being introduced in probably the coming 6 to 12 months after that. So it is an important thing to note that kinetic is going to become the standard very soon. So from 2026.2, the kinetic screens are going to be the standard. So we all need to kind of start preparing to migrate from our current classic views over to the kinetic. Okay, now this will be a bit of a change management process, and we are more than happy to assist with any transition that it comes from that. And will no doubt be reaching out to all of you at some point over the next 6 to 12 months to see if you need any assistance with that transition as well. There are some, depending on what version you're on, or if you're on in SaaS already, or if you're on-prem, some of those screens will be available for you to use. And from 2025.1, there will be an option, for you to actually check and convert over to the kinetic to have a bit of a test out as well. So yeah, that's the difference between the classic and the kinetic screens. There will be a transition period, and we will start to show more and more of the kinetic screens in future webinars as well. So I hope that answered that question. I think that is all the questions that we have here at the moment. Give it maybe a couple of seconds to see if anyone else wants to put anything in there. And if not, we will finish it up. It looks like that might be it. Oh, future webinars. Yes, so we will be having future webinars, yes. They're at this stage, they're going to be running around once a month, and we're going to be alternating between the different business types, basically. So last month we held an operations webinar, and this month we've got our senior living. Next month we have our Epicor Financials. So for those of you that are interested, tools for troubleshooting GL postings, which we have been discussing, that may not be super interesting to some, but for accountants, it's like music to their ears. So that will actually be a really, really helpful one to attend. I do recommend attending that one just for those initial troubleshooting steps. And then we will cycle through again and have more webinars based on the operations, senior living, and financials. Alrighty, so I think that will be it. I will leave you there, and we will see you at the next one. Thank you very much for attending, everyone.